today I wanted to talk about understanding and utilizing and balancing, I think more is the right term, intensity and volume within your workouts, particularly in today's discussion as it relates to building muscle and strength. And I'll kind of preface this with, there's kind of like two types of people out there, and this has come up in the last couple of weeks, and just some of the clients I've seen out there on the floor, and then people that I've talked to. I had a conversation this morning, specifically with a very good friend of mine who's really struggling right now with a orthopedic issue, bodybuilder, and this has kind of taken away the bodybuilding from him. He's suffering right now from a pain perspective, and he's also suffering just from a psychological and emotional perspective because it literally got taken away from him at a point where he's probably in the best shape of his life, kind of coming in. And my point in the compare and contrast of the two different types of people is he's the type of person that is just going 100% all the time, and likely doing too much. Now, that's not necessarily the cause of what's going on with him. I don't know that for sure, but let's just say it wasn't helpful, right? But he's going hard all the time. He's an athlete, then was a power lifter, then got into bodybuilding. He's just, the dude's just full speed ahead all the time. Yeah. And believes in his head, like, I could be going harder. So there's that type of person. And then there's the other type of person that probably isn't doing quite enough, right? Or could be going harder. And the dichotomy there is very interesting, especially as a coach when you're dealing with those, like, let's say at hour 1 at 8 a.m. or whatever, you've got the doesn't do enough. And then at 9 o'clock, hour 2, you've got the person that you just have to throttle back or try to pull the reins back on all the time. That's the thing. Anyway, coming in today, the conversation I had with him this morning, which was a long one, was sort of volume and intensity on how he's going to need to adjust his program to come out of his current situation and think more about the longer term. And he's set up well to do this. And so I just kind of was going down through this convo with him about, hey man, here's a different way to look at your program. And I promise you, when you look at it, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to go, that's not enough. That looks like it's not enough work. And two, when you get in there to do that work, you're going to leave that workout or those workouts and you're going to go, I could be working harder. And I understand both of those are true, from an outside in looking perspective, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that on the side of, I'm not doing enough. And anyway, I wanted to talk about today to help people understand how to get those gains through understanding the volume aspect of training and the intensity aspect of training as it relates. Also, we have to talk about like the frequency will come up here, and then the time or the duration you spend in your training sessions. But we're really picking out the volume and intensity piece. Yeah.
You were talking about volume and intensity and how, there's the two camps of people as far as like not necessarily doing enough, or they're looking at the program thinking that's not enough. So when you're saying that, are you saying that they're not intense enough in their workout, or they're looking at the volume thinking that's not enough volume?
Both. And I think that comes with not understanding it and looking at it kind of one workout at a time rather than over the longer period of time. So before we kind of get into that, just kind of reaching back. When I was younger, there was a point in time, I think, I was a kid that started lifting weights. I had some really great results really fast. And I think it was all due to intensity. But it was also due to, I sort of knew what I was doing. My old man had coached me. He had a little bit of knowledge under his belt. And so I kind of knew how to stack or put together different exercises where a lot of kids were going in. It's either bench press or bis and tris, right? I was doing all kinds of different things. So there was a high amount of volume and there was a high amount of intensity in my training sessions. That probably didn't need to be that kind of a volume, but I had nothing better to do. Yeah. Right. I also had all the time in the world, like going out to the weight room after school or whatever. It'd be in there for hours, right? Because what else am I going to do? It kept me out of trouble. But I also had like the energy to do it. I had the resiliency. Like I could go in there for 2 hours of work and, still be putting in work. So the results that yielded for me were I put on a lot of muscle. I was also at a time where my hormones are racing. I'm growing. I was eating anything and everything I could. I could literally anything and everything. So it was like, look, I'd go home and I'd clean out the pantry And, mom would keep the thing stocked or, the refrigerator stocked. So I had that for me too. And I didn't have to worry about kind of overeating. As much as I was eating, I probably could have been eating more, at the intensity and again, the volume of training I was doing. And stack that on the wrestling, the football, the track and field, just being a kid, all that stuff. Like I had a really good result with that. And then I took that into my younger 20s or in early 20s. And the intensity game kind of always worked out for me. And I never really thought about the volume. And so in how much training I was actually doing, the total work that I was doing. So it's probably important for us to define this. But I will say this, at one point I wasn't getting the results anymore. And I remember being very frustrated by that. And I just tried to pour on more weight to try to push it. And what I recognized is like that was getting harder and harder for me to do. Like the percentage of gain that I was getting now compared to where I was when I was younger, or just kind of following this meathead model, if you will, this meathead approach was really slowing down. And I was really getting frustrated with that. So I started doing some reading, some research, and I studied guys like Charles Poliquin, and there were a lot of dudes. And I kind of, and it was a lot of the Eastern European stuff, because those guys were at the time, this was years ago, they were at the front end of all of this. Yeah. And what I decided to do was pull back on my training. I was training 5-6 days a week. I went down to 4 days a week. And so I was doing like a 2-hour workout Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, instead of like your typical bro split Monday through Friday, take the weekends off. So I changed it up. And what I was able to do was push more with more intensity during that time. And I did see some gains until I didn't anymore. And that brings us to kind of this volume intensity thing that I wanted to talk about, because I think a lot of people have kind of reached that peak or reach that peak at some point if they're really pushing and they're trying to figure it out and they can't really wrap their arms around it. But that's sort of my experience that brought me to trying to understand volume training or where volume plays into your training better.
Well, and I think that's where, when you're trying to balance this ever flowing, like needing to go back and forth between maybe a little bit more intensity, maybe a little bit more volume, especially when you're younger or learning to lift, like we've talked about like these neurological benefits of learning how to actually be intense, right? Like someone who's newer to lifting, they don't actually know how to recruit their whole body. Their nervous system doesn't know how to do that. So for a while, you can just ramp up intensity. You could do 3 sets of 5 and just keep ramping up intensity, or in this case, load. Mm-hmm. And you can keep kind of banging your head against the wall with that for a while, and you'll keep progressing. Yes, you're going to probably put on some muscle. You're going to gain some mass, but a lot of that could be just from you actually learning how to utilize like more neural drive and more output over these given years. And then that's where for you, right, you ramped up your intensity. Maybe you felt a little bit of that. Yes, you put on some muscle, but then you kind of ran into a spot where maybe you tapped out that ability to just pure output, mm-hmm. right? Pure building from that side of things. And then you needed to switch back to get some volume, to get a different kind of stimulus, because now you've tapped into how to get more of the system, more of your power surging into it, if we can think about it like that. So it's kind of finding that balance.
Yeah, I kind of think about the volume component as being your foundation and your base mm-hmm. from which to build upon. So kind of like a pyramid. So looking at volume and then looking at intensity as being whether it's the load or effort that you're putting in. And as your intensity increases, then your pyramid kind of goes up.
Yeah, your volume decreases mm-hmm. generally.
Yeah.
Unless you're just trying to push the ends of the envelope every single time. But let's talk about it just for a second. So intensity is generally, defined in the weight room by load, how much kind of weight is on the bar. And that's not entirely true. There's a lot of ways to gauge intensity, and you can adjust a lot of variables to make your workout more intense. But mm-hmm. I think in the case of today, we're kind of just going to talk about sort of loading the bar, just pushing more weight. Because I think that's where most people are managing, or not managing, but more assessing their gains. Like,
that's a metric for seeing that. Yeah,
there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's how they're making a decision on whether or not the workout is working or not, right? Or their program is working or not. So for today, but we're talking basically about the effort put in, right? And so that comes through a lot of things: intention, additional load. It could be also managed through rest times, increasing, decreasing rest times.
You can even get into like the speed of the bar, like things like that.
Absolutely. All of those things play into the term of intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Volume is a little bit different. Volume is the total work that gets done over the course of a particular set, a workout, a week, a month, a year, a training period, however you want to define it. And I think one of the easiest way for people, if you just like an easy math problem for you to do, to be able to track your volume of workout or volumes, the volume that you're doing within your training or your workouts, is just take total, total reps, total sets, and total weight that you pushed.
And the frequency of that.
And
I guess the total of the training year.
It's just the total, right? Over the entire year, for every workout over the entire year.
Yes.
Right? And at the end of that, or that number is going to represent the total volume of work that you did. And that's kind of like the litmus for when you go back and you look at, did I do more or less work? That number will tell you that every single time. It's very simple math. It's very rudimentary, but it works.
Well, and that's where I think, again, there's people who can probably ramp up their intensity. There's people who can ramp up their volume. But the people who tend to go intensity, oftentimes they start to sacrifice volume. Whether it's they're just not able to get as many training days, or maybe they were doing a 3x10, but now they're doing a 3x3. So they feel like they're pushing the intensity more, but the actual that number, when they multiply it, they're actually doing less work.
So,
right?
That goes back to my dialing my days back to 4 days a week to trying to push intensity. And what that actually did was it decreased my volume.
Exactly.
Right. And so I got a result from the intensity, but there was a point of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of back up from this and kind of lay down a simple foundation, we talk about this all the time. And that is the goal for us as coaches, but training ourselves is always like, what's the minimum effective dose to get the maximum result? That ultimately should be the goal if you want longevity in this at all. And sometimes that gets sacrificed or compromised depending on, kind of where you are in life. What are the demands of the sport or the thing that you're training for? That absolutely plays in. But if you want to do this long term, that has to be a foundation at some level, right? So we go again back to this like fitness to fatigue model. The object is to give myself enough of a stimulus so that it takes me beyond where my limit is, but not so far beyond that I can't recover back to baseline, or just above baseline. Mm-hmm. And that just above baseline is the improvement in my fitness, my strength, my endurance, whatever it is that I'm trying to train for, so that I can then repeat another training session to then repeat that the gains again. Then I'm going to take myself a bit beyond threshold, just enough that my body then recovers beyond that previous level of gains that I got. So that's what we're doing, workout to workout, week to week, month to month. And so you mentioned things like neurological adaptation, that happens during that time, and trying to recruit more, of the neuromuscular system to do more work over time. But over time, like your body can only handle so much. And so that's where these variables of frequency, intensity, time type, or more specifically, we get intensity and volume of total work done. Those are things that you need to pay attention to. And it's interesting, like a lot of the people that I talk to, and that's this guy, he's 34 now. So what was working for him in the past, not working anymore. Mm-hmm. Like you can't just keep hammering your body, dude, and expect to get the same gains. It's the same, like, so as a beginner, like thinking about, if you're sort of new to this, you're brand new to this, or when I say new, you're inside your first year, maybe year to 2 years, like intensity is going to work for you, right? And that is, you are just kind of pushing that neuromuscular system to go through that fitness to fatigue model over and over again, as long as you're backing it up with sleep or rest, recovery, and nutrition and all those kind of things. The intensity game probably is more the thing you want to be playing. But as you get further down the road, the volume game is where you're going to want to understand that, because intensity at some point there will be a point of diminishing returns.
Exactly, or everybody would be squatting 1,000 pounds, and there's a point where you need to manage like the training volume around it. You can't just keep pushing intensity, continuing. And I think to go back to the recovery model, I think that's where someone like your friend, like he might struggle with, or the person who's maybe doing too much on that end, is they're always wanting to feel like more is better.
Oh, it's a trap.
More is better. And I see this so much with athletes in general. Just more is better. Okay, even if this stretch is good for me, okay, I'm going to do it 10 times a day, right? Better, more is better. And they get to this point where they beat themselves down, right? And you mentioned it. We need to recover back above baseline to continue for the wave of this progression to continue to go up. But a lot of people beat themselves down really hard, and maybe they're getting close, but they're not fully recovered, and then they beat themselves down. Sometimes it's extreme, right? Sometimes you're going to be halted really quickly. Maybe it's an injury, or you're just crashed, no recovery. But sometimes it might be, I think a lot of people slightly overtrain chronically and do that over the long haul, over years, where they're just slightly, and that's why they're kind of spinning their wheels. They're never really making a lot of progress, because they're not managing these two things, the intensity and the volume. They're always a little bit under recovered. And I have that conversation a lot with our members of like, okay, how do we manage these recoveries and intensities throughout your whole training week and month and year and all that? So
yeah, I think that's the next thing to look at. Part of it is like, you'll never understand this unless you track. Like, you have to understand, because you think you may be adding more, but you might not be, right? And here's the other trap, particularly for that person that's always trying to push. Mm-hmm. This is me, right? This was me for a long time. Not anymore. I'd like to think I'm a bit smarter than that now, but like, I would back off a little bit, or you go into your workout, whatever, and you're not taking into account all the other subjective and objective things that are going into what you just walked into for the day, and you put that weight on the bar or whatever, and you complete that, and you're like, holy shit, that felt really good. What's the answer? What should I do next? Fucking more, right? Throw more on there, right? Like, let's push this thing as far as I can, versus like being satisfied with that stimulus that you just gave yourself. You can still get a result from, right? You can still get gains from. You do not have to go, we've talked about like failure training or near failure in things. There is something to be said about leaving a couple in the tank, right? And in that case, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I felt like I had more in the tank, so much more in the tank that I would do a whole other set, right? Well, I should be taking that information forward into my next workouts and be satisfied walking away from that workout going, it's working. Why would I want to fuck this up? By then pushing further than my body can handle in order to ultimately respond to this in the way that I'm trying to get it to respond to. This shit's working, man. Don't mess this up. There's a little bit of a patience in there. And there's also this, always trying to win, and push to the next thing. So understanding, again, going back to tracking and whatever, and knowing what you're doing from a loader intensity perspective in this case, as it relates to volume and how that plays in down the line. So this goes all the way back to what I was saying about, look, man, I'm going to give you this program. I'm going to show you this program. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at it and you're going to go, dude, what's up? That's like half of what I was doing. Okay, but let's look at the whole thing here. So going back to there's a lot of research around this, and it all kind of sucks, if I'm being honest. And I don't mean that. I kind of mean that tongue in cheek, but there's so much individuality that goes into understanding how this works for people. And that is, again, how many total reps and sets do I need? What's the right amount in order to get the gains, right? Is it different for the bigger muscle groups than the smaller muscle groups? Do my biceps need as much as my quads do, in terms of volume and stuff like that? So I'm going to throw some numbers out there. And, the researchers generally agree across these studies that it's somewhere probably between 10 and 20 total sets per week, right? So think of a week of being 7 days. You don't have to do all of those sets in one workout, and we're going to come back to that.
Yes, yeah.
And do all muscles respond the same than other muscles? That's a little bit of a tough one, because usually when they go through these research, this research, they're doing one thing to get a result in one muscle. But if you think about a training week, I know I can handle a lot more intensity and a lot more volume through my lower extremity, through my legs. Anything from lower body, lower extremity, I can really push. Well, that kind of makes sense. There's a lot of things going on there. But as I move to my upper body, let's just say my quote unquote back and chest might be able to handle a bit more volume, but keep in mind also that my shoulders, biceps, triceps, they're also working anytime I'm pulling, pushing, or pressing. Mm-hmm. So I don't think people are taking that into account. So when you look at okay, so I be doing the same amount of reps and sets for my biceps on bicep day, or in my bicep workout as I'm doing for my chest on chest day. I'm going to say no, because when you're pulling, you're also using your biceps. So again, it's a little bit, the research is a little bit kind of gray there. But I think most people could agree it's somewhere between like 10 and 20 sets per week, just going back to that. And then it's how we dose those. So then you kind of look at how it's dosing them. So if you go back to the old bro splits, when I first started doing this, going back to the intensity and volume thing that I was doing, I just ripped them, the workout straight out of Muscle and Fiction magazine, right? What is Lee Haney doing, right? What is Dorian Yates doing? What is Ronnie Coleman doing? If he says this is the chest workout to do, then I'm going to do that. And what was that? That was at least 12 sets of chest in a single workout. Right? One workout. And for me, that was Mondays.
Was your 12 sets, was that of 3 different exercises?
It was 3 to 4. And it wasn't weird. It didn't get nuanced like you're going to do 3 sets of this and then 3 exercises, 3 sets, and then 2 other exercises, 2 sets of those. It was basically like, no, you're doing like 4 sets of each of these 3 exercises or 3 sets of 4 exercises, right? If that's not what I just said. So, however the 12, it wasn't 4 exercises, 3 sets apiece. It could be 3 exercises, 4 sets apiece. The bottom line was you were doing 12 sets.
Yeah, you need to meet this minimum requirement of volume.
So It was the barbell bench press. Then it was the incline dumbbell chest press. Then it was a cable or a machine fly. And then it was like a dumbbell pullover or something. Everybody was trying to, was using that one. So that was the thing. Dude, and then you also had to train your bis or tris on that same workout. And it was the same thing. It was at least 9 sets per body part there on the smaller body part.
For isolating.
For isolating like your triceps. Keeping in mind that those, again, back in bis or back in tris, I started to think about this, like I'll get more out of my tricep workout if I combine that with back than if I did it with my chest, because my triceps are working when I'm
pushing.
I'm pushing.
Yeah.
So I kind of figured that out early on. But dude, these workouts took, and I was working at intensity, so I needed recovery, right? And those recovery periods in between sets are, 60, 90 seconds. Dude, these workouts took 2 hours to get through.
Yeah, it used to be a minimum for me. It was like 2.5 hours, but I don't have that time anymore.
Yeah, you don't have that time, and your body, at what point are you not getting anything in return from the extra sets that you're doing, right, during that time? So there's some research that suggests after about 5 sets with a body part, and that's, we're working somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 8 to 15 repetitions. There's some research that suggests you're not getting any hypertrophy result from additional sets beyond that.
Well, and I don't think we defined this earlier of it, 10 to 20 stimulating sets per week. So meaning a set that is at enough intensity that it gives this response, right?
We did not talk about that.
We're not talking about that. So, when we talk 10 to 20 sets, some people, maybe the newer person thinks like, oh, is that including my warm-up sets or these lighter sets?
No.
If I do all that in a workout, I do 6 warm-up sets and then my 3, that's 9 right there. That's right. I'm halfway there, so, but it's stimulating sets. So if we're talking about that style of doing them
for hypertrophy,
right? Stimulating sets. There is other goals, there's other intentions, there's skill of movement, there's all these different things we can think about. But for hypertrophy, for this lens, if we're really pushing on that bench press and we're actually pushing at intensity that's stimulating, you use the example of triceps, right? Triceps are involved in benching. If we're doing triceps on that same day, and we do triceps at the end of the workout as the last thing on that same day, is that really a stimulating set? Is that really, are you working with the same load as when you switched it to doing triceps on your back day? Great. And that's the thing we need to think about.
Yeah, great point. I think as, in terms of defining that, like, well, how do we know if it's stimulating or not? Well, most of the research shows that if you took basically like the NSCA 1 rep max protocol to measure what your 1 rep max was and whatever lift for, again, like your bench press or your tricep, whatever that would be, like an extension of some kind, basically 80% or below is giving you a hypertrophy response. Again, let's call it more like 60 to 80%, right? That's the zone that you need to be in to be stimulating hypertrophy or muscle growth. Anything above 80% is more of a strength, is more promoting strength, right? And a lot of that just has to do because you can't keep the time under tension the same with that heavier load, obviously, right? I can't do as many reps at 85, 90% of my 1 rep max as I could, say 60, 65 to 80% of that. So that goes back to your how am I measuring stimulus? So in your example, bicep or a chest to triceps, if I just went through like a 5x5, let's say a bench press, like every time I do that bench press and I'm pushing to the end, right? My triceps are being fatigued. So now I'm moving over to my tricep specific exercises, whatever they are. Do I have enough in the tank to give it the 65 to 80%, effort to then, percentage of that 1 rep max of whatever that test is, right? Whatever it is, to stimulate those things to grow in the way that they could. Or I could think about it doing a little bit differently. So going back, you said 10 to 20 stimulating sets. What if I broke those sets up over a couple of different workouts? And I think this is where people get largely confused and or where they really struggle. For two reasons. One, going back, they look at it and they go, that's not enough work in the workout that I did on day one, right? And I don't like the way this feels. I feel like I have too much in the tank, right? I totally get it. The second part is they don't have enough time during the week to manage these workouts so that they could get that volume of training done over more days. That's a tough thing. So I think you'll see people in the gym that can go, 3 hours, and work out and still get gains. And I use that 3 hours sort of as an exaggeration. They're not actually working at intensity or stimulating for 3 hours. There's a lot of rest time in there. Maybe they're working on their mobility. Maybe they're shaking their protein drink up. Maybe they're talking to whoever, or they're, taking pictures on their cell phone. You know what I mean? But my point is they seemingly can stay in there for a very long time and still get a very good result. Well, there's factors there, training age, again, that neural adaptation that person has, also the metabolic adaptation they have to be able to manage that workout through that amount of time. And they know their body, they know what works and what doesn't work for them. Also, they might have some things on board, right? That give them the ability to prolong their workouts and sustain a result beyond where the unsupported, if you will, the person that's not on PEDs could go. That's the advantage of PEDs. They help you go harder for longer.
And you recover quicker from that going harder for
period.
Every time.
Yeah. So it doesn't take away from the work you have to put in. It just helps you do that work more efficiently and then recover from that work more efficiently, both in time and or rate and time, right? So that you can go back and again, give yourself that stimulus again. So there's kind of a little bit of a thing to consider there. But again, going back, I think people struggle with this volume thing when they're looking at, dude, I only got 3 days a week to work out. Like, how do I manage all this? That comes up a lot.
Well, and that's where, a quote unquote bro split, I think I saw, someone talking with someone else about this too. It's like, it's kind of like almost a mandatory like newbies, like program. Like everyone, I feel like at some point goes through like a bro split when they start working out.
That's a great place to start.
It's a great place to start. And it's a great way to learn. There's merit in it. But for the person who's needing time efficiency, for the person who can't get to that level of intensity or get that enough training volume in those, amount of days, going to different splits like a full body split or a push-pull split or a squat pull and a push hinge split, like things like that are a great way to break up intensity. You can start utilizing things like supersets that, and I like, when we say a superset, that's something that's non-contradicting. So it's a superset is not doing a bench press into a chest fly. Those are contradicting. That's going to just continue to fatigue. That's like
a compound set.
That's a compound set, exactly. And I don't think people know that a lot of the times. They think superset's just 2 exercises. So, but maybe it's a pushing movement followed by a pulling movement, or a pushing a pushing upper body that's maybe a little bit more stimulating, followed by a hinging lower body movement. That's you're still getting a good stimulus, but maybe it's not your heavy deadlifts for that week. Excuse me. But that's where you can start to still get relatively stimulating sets, because there is global fatigue, but there's a lot of this is acute or is local fatigue to a specific muscle. So you can still get a pretty good stimulus when you're doing something like a superset, which I love to utilize, especially for my busy clients.
For time efficiency.
For time efficiency, I think one of the ways, the things that it's a prerequisite to get the most out of that is you have to have the capacity
yes.
to be able to do that. And so, you're nodding your head over there, like capacity being your ability to do the work, like from a cardiovascular perspective, from a metabolic perspective, also from a mindset perspective, because those are all things like, I understand that I'm tired, right, from the set that I just did, but I understand I'm not as tired, again, if I'm going from a high to low, like a hinge to a push or something like that. Yeah, okay, I just got worn out there. My heart rate's up a little bit, but I still, if I recover enough, then I'm going to be good. And I can get into this high intensity push, right? And get just as much out of that as I am out of my hinge. And then again, rest, move back into my hinge movement, and then come back. That takes capacity. You have to be working out for a while in order to build that up to where, again, to your point, Ryan, where you're hitting it with enough stimulation to make that kind of thing work. So there's a conditioning phase that you need to go through before those types of training splits are the most beneficial. At the same time, if you're just jumping into this as a new person, you're like, dude, I got 2 days a week to do this. And this is all I got right now because of schedules or whatever else, or that's all I'm really committed to, which is another conversation. Well, then you're going to struggle for a while. It's not that I'm not going to give you that kind of a split. We have to get it all done in 2 days. Just understand this is going to take a little bit longer. And maybe I'm working less intensity, I'm working more intensity during those times that I am working to build the capacity and get that stimulus. And I may be making sure I'm peppering in some more cardiovascular work or metabolic conditioning work so that they have this engine underneath to be able to power them through those types of splits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the other thing is too, when that circumstances that you're faced with, it's not like you're going to be there forever.
Correct.
So it's just a period of time where this is how you're going to train. You learn to train until you can, and you do have the capacity to, work on volume or however your program needs to go.
Yeah, I think as people start to get, I think the upside to this, like kind of going back and taking a knock at the person that isn't really committed, part of it is some of that commitment just will change. The commitment level changes when they start to see a result. So if they just stay consistent for even a few weeks, you're going to start to see some tremendous results. And then oftentimes they're encouraged to do more. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to come into the gym and work out with their coach more. It just means, hey, you know what? Now I'm walking, now because I have this increased capacity. I understand, like I feel better and I want to move. I'm feeling driven to move. They'll go do something else. They'll ride the bike. They'll go hiking. They'll try to run, something like that where they're doing extra activity, even if it's yoga or Pilates or something like that, but they're moving their body. That happens. I think that's an adaptation that happens with the adaptations.
Yes.
I've seen that a lot, but going back, like the person that's struggling with their time and trying to get it all done. Couple mistakes that I see people happening again is falling into the trap of what I mentioned before, which is like when they feel good, they want to push harder versus you got to be satisfied with what you get with what you're doing and understand and recognize that the program maybe is working exactly the way it is supposed to be working. So we just continually make these adjustments. So that's a trap. And I think that part of that trap also is just that wanting to have immediate gratification. But certainly for the person that's the always pushing person, always doing a lot or on the borderline of doing too much, that's something that they need to be, acutely aware of. And the only way to understand if it's working for you or not, truly, is to have some kind of a tracking mechanism. I think that's one thing. I think
the tracking and the plan, though.
That too, yes.
I think the plan is
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the plan is what helps to keep the patience when you're the type of person that wants to constantly do more, or you're not feeling fulfilled with what's in front of you and you think that you need to push or do more.
You know what modality came along and just blew that one out of the park so nobody even had to think about it? CrossFit.
Oh. Yeah.
That was the one. There was never a plan. I mean,
when it got bastardized.
That might be a little bit unfair
Yeah.
because and I've said this a million times. I know some tremendous coaches in that world that have done some tremendous things with themselves and with their clients and with their business. My point of that is like they didn't think about it that way. They just showed up and took an ass whipping, right? And they were trying to do it all at one time, and it seemingly worked until it didn't. Right? Yes, if you push your body and you put those demands on it, it's lifting things, it's running, it's moving things faster, it's pulling your body up through space. There's all of the gymnastics movements and things like that, the calisthenics type stuff. Your body's going to respond to that, but without a strong foundation, going back to the bro split of strength as a foundation for kind of everything, as well as some level of metabolic conditioning to build on, you are playing this tug of war all the time and what's getting better versus what isn't. Well, my WOD was faster. That is like the lowest fucking metric that you could possibly measure with regard to a result that you're getting. Maybe not in the sport of CrossFit, because that's what we're measuring at the end of the day. But over the long term, in terms of longevity of that, that's something that you want to be very, very, very acutely aware of.
Well, and you said a lot of smart participants of CrossFit or athletes, right? Or coaches. And I think a lot of people get, convoluted between the sport of CrossFit and, and the fitnessing of CrossFit, right?
Yep.
So all these smart athletes, coaches, top of the block, or, top of the heap, the pile, there you go. They are having a plan. They're not doing a WOD every single day. They're doing a WOD once or twice a week to test that their plan is working, or to test the skills of that WOD that they need to be prepared for. But they are undulating things, or having a plan, or tracking their total volume, or having different goals, or doing these different models that it is planned and purposeful, and they're managing fatigue and all these other stuff. They're not just doing WODs every day.
You're 100% right. I mean, I am fortunate to know two of the top competitors that ever competed in that sport. One is Jason Khalipa, who was kind enough to spend some time with me down here, and we're not buddies by any stretch, but I'm a huge fan of Jason, and I followed him and what he's been able to do as an athlete. I mean, savage, right? He's a legend in that sport, but also with his athletes and what he's done with his own business. And then the other guy being Jacob Hepner, who's been a top 10 performer there at the CrossFit Games many, many times, has now recently moved over to the Tactical Games. And I can tell you their workouts are not WODs every day. They're very calculated. They're almost too smart for the internet. You know what I mean? Like, it's particularly like social media. When I see them put their stuff out, they're putting their stuff out because they know it grabs attention. But I know what those workouts look like behind the scenes, and it is not all WODs, not all CrossFit all the time, if you will. It's what they're doing is very specific to support their sport or what they need to get done. So dialing it all the way back, going back to schedules, right? And managing volume, intensity, and things like that for people that are on a tight schedule. Other people that I see really struggling with this, that are trying to do it all the time, are those that are like first responders or work like shift work, that have really effed up schedules, firefighters in particular, where they're like, they work 3 days, and in those 3 days, they might not sleep, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They might have all the time in the world, right? So how are you managing through this? And they have these off days where they need to manage their recovery, their life, be back with their families, do that other stuff, be in a different environment, and still get their workouts done. These folks tend to struggle a lot, and they're also, in general, the people that like to push. So when they do get the opportunity to work out, and they're not sure how much time they're going to have to do it, right? And they're also maybe fresh one day, not the other. When they are fresh, they just go, right? And that there could be a point of diminishing returns there. And I think that's something interesting, if you're just looking at like, are you really gaining anything by that? Versus going back and having a plan that you can then track to see, like, am I doing more? Am I actually doing more work? Okay, this lift went up. All right, but what else happened? Like, did I get better at anything else, or am I getting worse? And part of this is like, you have to have a well-defined goal. So we started this conversation with based on hypertrophy and strength building, like talking about volume and where you start to manage that into the programs or your program. I think this is where, and I don't want to get into this rabbit hole, but this is where like the conjugate method starts to come in, and people going back to being bastardized or a total misunderstanding of it. The conjugate method is an awesome method of sort of combining all of these different approaches to build max strength and hypertrophy, and manage that around also capacity, right? And continuing to build things like muscular endurance and cardiovascular endurance, depending on what your goal is. And that takes a lot of planning and a high level of awareness, because we are managing percentages of lifts, going back to what we were talking about with the 1 rep max, the 80s and below, the 80 and above kind of thing, where you're putting that into your week. And I'm seeing a lot of people put out programs that they say they're basing it around the conjugate method. And in theory they are, but they're missing the detail in terms of, what does this mean for you? Like, what is the right intensity for you to be working at? And a lot of times they're managing this around RPE, which, stop it. Like, you're missing a massive part there. There has to be some hard and fast numbers within that conjugate method.
Yeah.
or if you're using the conjugate method, to actually be applying the conjugate method. While it is a method, there's some real science in there. And again, when we look at, again, the concepts of intensity and volume, that is what you're managing in that conjugate type of program. And this kind of brings up another thing, which is like, okay, well, how do I do this and still try and get stronger at certain lifts and not lose any endurance and not lose my speed, or, I still want to go to jujitsu and all of those things. Let's talk about it. Like, so if I'm going to jujitsu and I'm that jujitsu guy, right? And that's my life, kind of thing outside of what else I do. But I also know I need to get my strength training in. How do I manage volume and intensity in my strength training program if I'm going to jiu-jitsu 4 days a week? What should I be doing?
Well, I mean, I think it's to, you have to think about like how long are these bouts in jiu-jitsu? What's the intensity? What day is your more intense day, right? So one day might be more your skill work. So maybe near there, you're having a little bit more work or just effort in general in your workout near there. Versus if one day is where you're putting more work on the mat, where you're actually like grappling and and that's more intense. The stimulus you need, the minimum effective dose, the workouts around that can be pretty low, right? Maybe it's fewer sets, maybe it's less volume or things like that, and you're managing that. And so I think it's kind of bouncing around, having a plan within your training week, even with your jiu-jitsu. And that's how you kind of can plan around your program, your lifting program around that.
Yeah, part of my approach.
No, go ahead.
Part of my approach to that would also be like, don't think you have to get it all done on those 2 days.
Yes.
I would say you could also do, and I've heard this referred to as like a trigger session or like a micro dose of exercise. So like you could pick one exercise that you do even on jiu-jitsu day, like even on a heavy training day, and you just do that and you work that at intensity, right? You do a 5x5, right, with the squat. That's all you do.
Yeah.
Right. And then you don't have to worry about that intensity later on in the week and managing it inside another workout. Right. Maybe you do maybe it's arm day, on a higher intensity day. You could still train on a day that you train your biceps and or your triceps on a higher intensity jiu-jitsu day. Right. Because there's less demand there. Yes. And I'm still giving my body that dose of stimulus to help it grow or continue to stay strong or both.
Yeah, no, I'm just, thinking about as far as like if you're doing jujitsu 4 days a week, then yeah, it's actually, I think, well, for me, I'm a very visual person. It's actually sitting down with the calendar for the month and looking and planning out my days as far as what days am I doing jujitsu, and is there a day like you had mentioned that's more intense on the mat, whereas another day might be more fundamentals, and then planning out where my lifts are going to be. And if the goal is hypertrophy, the goal is having to get that volume in, then scheduling that, literally putting it on the calendar so I can see it and I can plan it. And then should those days change based on whatever's happening with jiu-jitsu, then you just flip your training days around as well.
Right.
If you have the capacity to do that within your work day.
Yep.
Well, and I'm not a jiu-jitsu guy, but I do know enough that like, the top end that in the jiu-jitsu sport or any kind of grappling or anything like that, they're not going hard on the mat every single time. Mm-hmm. So they're managed that. Right. And yeah, I love mentioning that, another plug, like I had written an article about the micro workouts on our blog, like almost probably 2 years ago now at this point. But talking about micro workouts, that's really popular in athletics. That's where you get this enough that's a stimulus, but so if we're looking at like our total training volume and intensity throughout the week, maybe you have time, maybe you have equipment at home, right? Maybe, you have this workout where you were used to doing that killing you on Mondays, but it's taking away from your time on the mat on Tuesdays. Maybe you literally break that workout into, there's two things I love to do when we're doing that. Is one, you can break it out into maybe different days if you need to. But a lot of times to manage my total like fatigue, not everyone's blessed to do this, but if you're able to, I'll hit maybe some of my higher fatiguing things in the morning, right, or when I'm fresh, or I'll hit those heavy squats, and then maybe I have some lighter accessory work, and I hit that in the afternoon, evening. Maybe I hit that after my session if I feel like I have a little bit left or something like that. And managing, one, it could get you more intensity for that, but it also makes it where you're able to kind of have this like macro recovery game, where you're not just overstimulating and killing yourself. Doing 4 sets of your chest exercise, or of your chest, 4 sets of 4 different chest exercises on a Monday probably isn't a good idea for that athlete, because they're going to go into that Monday or Tuesday grappling session and just, have so much fatigue that they can't even manage it.
Yeah.
Or the firefighter, or, all those different people.
Yeah. So I think like whether it's a first responder or jiu-jitsu or not, if you're trying to manage things, because you're limited on time, you're traveling, whatever else, a couple other ways to kind of manage intensity and volume. One would be like, I would pick, and goes back sort of the conjugate method too. I would pick maybe 1 or 2 major strength exercises you're going to train for a month. And that's your focus on your intensity day.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it's a squat, maybe it's a deadlift. It's whatever the hell you want it to be. Right. But that's the heavier, maybe 5x5 or 12x2 or, 10x3, something like that. Right. Where we're building in some volume, but a lot of intensity there. Again, the 5x5 is 25 reps. The 12x2 is 24 reps.
Yeah.
Right. So we're still managing those things, but we're able to push that intensity. And that might be all I do in that workout. Right. And then go back to your accessory work. That's when I can add in a little bit more volume with those accessories and really push the appropriate intensity there around my other things that I'm trying to do, whether that's work, jiu-jitsu, bike riding, running, whatever else. So, my arms, my shoulders, my problem areas. And that's where I would say like, okay, so you've worked like your squat or whatever is your choice, but your posterior chain needs work. The next workout is you're going to add in some maybe lower volume, intense work for those areas, but then you can stack on the higher intensity, lower volume exercises for your hinging or whatever. But when you start to get in your arms and your shoulders or whatever it is that you're trying to train aesthetically or whatever else, then you can increase those accessory movements, and you can even put them in a couple of times during a week. So that's one way those are some ways, to kind of manage around this. For the person, let's switch it over. For the person that's not training hard enough, right? But has a high amount of volume. They're going to the gym every day, right? They're not seeing a result, right? As a result of they're not pushing hard enough. How do you measure that intensity? How do you ramp up that intensity? Well, I would ask you to look at like this is a big depends question, but I ask you to look at your whole program here. Like, what are we actually doing here? Like, what are the movements that you're being tasked to do within your workout program, and which ones are and which ones aren't hard? Because if you're working out 5 days a week and you're not getting a result, we can generally draw a straight line to probably one of 3 or 4 things.
Well, and man, I always use this example. It's kind of funny of like, being in the gym and doing something is a lot harder than laying on the couch.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people get caught up in like, oh, well, I'm here, I'm doing something, I'm not laying on the couch, I get an effect. And that might work for a little bit to just keep things moving. But like ramping up intensity and actually seeing and how to push, a good note, load is not always the biggest indicator, but it is a great indicator. Because I know a lot of people who go to the gym, and that's great, but maybe they do. I've seen this multiple times, countless times with people that have come with me as clients, where they do the same workout every day and they know what load they work with.
Oh, bro. We see that out here we see this in our group sessions all the time. We change the workouts every time, and they describe the same fucking way. Yeah. Doesn't matter what you can only try to encourage them and sometimes embarrass them, if need be, into, dude, you need to challenge yourself here. Like, what is going on? Like, if you just came in here to get sweaty today, fine, get sweaty. But if you want to get the benefit out of the programming and the thing that you're paying for here, which is us helping you get what you said you wanted to get, dude, listen to me. Grab the 22.5 this
At
time
least.
instead of the 20.
I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, if you're going from 20, grab the fucking 25.
Okay,
That's why I said at least.
Yeah.
Like, well, come on, man.
Man, it was so funny at this. We just finished 12s in our class, and I literally was just going over to everyone's barbell, and I was like, and I said at the start of the class, all right, guys, you guys this is the last week of this block. This is time where like you feel good on this. This is time to push a little bit more. I want to see that you guys are at least adding at the minimum a couple kgs on anything. And I want to see that you're pushing that.
There's
and so many
always
of them, they're doing the same weight they did on the start of the block, the start of a 5-week block. And like, that shouldn't be the case. So I literally was walking around and I was just throwing kg plates on everyone's barbell. And I was like, half of them didn't even notice. They didn't even see that I put them on there. And they just did it. And people neglect that like slow increase of intensity over time. And we didn't even talk about this, but like,
it's a solid point you just made there. And just, it doesn't take much.
it doesn't.
It's just that much more stimulus over time, which equals, going back to our little math problem we did at the beginning.
Yes.
At the end of the year or week, month, year, all those things, that is more work.
Yes.
That is more work done. And we know through science, in general, unless you've pushed the envelope to not get that return on investment because you're not recovering right, more work generally almost every time works out to be more gains.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and if you continue to do the same amount of work, your body also gets more efficient at doing said same work. So you might actually be regressing if you're doing the same thing at a certain point. Your body's getting more efficient of using less. Your body's really lazy at the end of the day. It wants to get things done the easiest way it can.
Yep.
So if you're continuing to do 20 pounds on that, you might actually at a certain point, again, regress. That's not going to be the same stimulus for you.
Sure.
Yep.
Ask the fat guy sitting on the couch that eats the same amount of calories he ate a year ago and he's continuing to get fatter.
Exactly. Yeah.
That your body's just going to allow that to happen because
Exactly.
that's the stimulus you're giving it. That's a really good point just in terms of managing intensity. Like for those people that maybe don't feel like they're doing or that are afraid of doing too much. What is too much? You'll know too much when your body's hurting, when you don't feel like working out anymore, when you're not sleeping at night, you're restless, right? When your appetite's fucked, right? When your digestion's messed up, like all those things are indicators that you're probably training too hard. If you're not feeling those things, like there's a time and a place to push the envelope a little bit and understand what your threshold is and what it isn't, right? So, okay, you're a little uncomfortable for a couple of days. Big deal. The body's an amazing adaptive machine. We just articulated that. Like it'll be better. You throwing an extra kilo, right, on that bar, extra 2 kilos, on that bar for your deadlift or whatever.
Please. You're not going to be limping out of here.
Hey, let's be honest about what the risk is there. It's very, very little. But if you just did that, and that was one thing, like when I started working out with Cece, long time ago, she was doing a lot of Olympic lifting, and it was like half kilo, at a time.
Olympic lifters are great at that.
Yeah, they are phenomenal at that. And I was just entering into the Olympic lifting. I hadn't done any of it since I was a kid. And I was coached wrong, and it was all bad. So I had to unfuck that. But I was coming back into it, and guess what was happening when I started? This was in my 30s when I was already well adapted to exercise and everything else. Guess what happened when I started Olympic lifting with the loads that I was using? Dude, they were going up exponentially, right? Yeah. Day to day, week to week, workout to workout. I was like, throw on 5 more kilos, throw on 10 more kilos. I can fucking do this. I was muscling my way through it like I had everything else in my life. Meanwhile, what I didn't realize was I was compromising, right, to get that load to where it needed to be versus the efficiency and effectiveness of how I was moving that load. And Cece's over here on the other side of the room or on the other corner on the platform, just half kilo at a time, continuing to
same
gain.
Exact mechanic.
6 months later, right? She's made the same gains kind of in load that I had made, right? If we're equating load to intensity, that I had made in 2 months. However, I had stopped.
Yeah.
Right. Like I wasn't moving anymore because I had compromised or I'd pushed too hard. Yes. And by the way, my shoulder was fucked. Everything was messed up. And she's just continuing to go along. Another example of that would be our pull-ups. Remember we had a pull-up challenge? Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, I got to the point where like she was just throwing on, another 3 pounds here, 2.5 pounds there, whatever. I was going like, fuck, if I can do the 45 strapped around my waist, throw that
95.
Throw that 75 on there.
Let's do it. Hell yeah.
And then my shoulder doesn't work anymore. Yeah. Was I getting stronger? Until I wasn't, right? So anyway, like managing that little bits at a time, that's a trap that I think a lot of people fall into, especially as they get into the newbie that gets into something new, or it's the intermediate lifter who's been like in it. Okay, well, I'm in my 2.5 years now. I am efficient. I am adapted. Like things are happening now, and I'm starting, and people are noticing, right? And I'm noticing, and I look better, and I feel more confident. And that trap of just load more on there, another 10 pounds, another 50 pounds, whatever it is versus, look, does it really make a difference if it's 10 pounds today or 10 pounds 2 weeks from now?
It's patience.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the hardest thing for the person that's always trying to push too hard. And if I'm any example of what not to do, that's it. Because it was just constant push, try to muscle my way through there. Again, we talked about getting on programs and stuff. We manage this shit for people all the time. What they decide to do with it is on them. There's a couple of different things. Like, again, if you want to see where you're going and kind of learn about it or whatever, and how we've managed intensity and volume, the 2 programs that we have that are self-guided programs, Strong and Max, that's exactly what they do. Max is assuming that you've got that solid capacity underneath you, your ability, your awareness of your body, movement, strength, and some level of power is already there. And we just kind of expand on that. Strong is definitely more of the hey, if you're maybe more of a novice to intermediate within your first couple of years, is a great way to kind of dial things back. But we very specifically manage that volume and that intensity through over a 4-month period. You'll even see like deloads in there to manage the intensity that we do give you, because we do ramp things up. But one of the things that people are super fired up about right now is the physique program, which is in our online membership as well. So you can check that out. That is one of those ones where it's broken up. Your workout sessions are broken up over a couple of days. And this is where I was going back to my buddy. He's going to look at it and he's going to go, dude, that's not enough work, right? I'm going to just do the work.
Yeah.
Just get into it and see, and tell me how your body feels and how your body responds. You're working over like an 8-day training cycle. You're going to hit everything twice inside that time. But the place to go to find out more about that is rdfprograms.com. You can find out about the Max and Strong program there. I bring that one up because I think that's where most people need to be spending their time. Like they need to get on a linear program to really understand how this works for them. And that Strong builds into that Max program. If you got on those programs and you spent basically the better part of a year doing that, I guarantee you're going to put on muscle. You're going to be way stronger. You're going to feel like more like an athlete. You're probably going to have some body composition changes, right? As you're gaining muscle and you're starting to manage your nutrition, you'll probably be able to eat more. Which is always a plus, and you're going to look way different in your clothes. And currently right now we're offering 25% off of those programs. So again, that's rdfprograms.com. Go there, we'll get you a code, and then you can use that at the point of sale. Anything you guys want to finish up with as we wrap this thing up?
I mean, I think those programs do it really well for you, but a lot of this is just learning like how to trust a coach or learn for yourself of how to manage these things, managing volume versus intensity. It may feel different week to week. It may feel different month to month in your whole training cycle, but a lot of this takes a lot of nuance, and the information is out there, right? There's lots of exercises out there. You can look up on YouTube how to do a million exercises. Where the nuance comes for you as an individual or with your coach or with your program is how to manage all these things, ramp you up, ease you in, dial back, and turn those dials, which is really where you can see the most results long term.
Yeah, once you feel empowered to do that, the sky's the limit for you, as long as you're not falling into the trap of, oh, I feel great today, let me beat my ass a little bit,
exactly.
a little bit more. So hang in there, stay patient, as Cece said, and best of luck to you.